Welcome everybody to this tea and chat. And we've not had so many people sign up for tea and chat for a long time. Not that I'm sure everybody will turn up, but welcome. So I'm going to hand over to Nikki, and she is going to do a little bit of a promo thing. And then our amazing volunteer Rachel is going to take over, and she is going to lead tonight's session. So Nikki.
Over to me.
Yes, it's you.
Can you see that, folks?
Yes, we can see it.
Yes. Super. I'm just doing a really, really quick intro to us. If I can get my slides up. Welcome, everybody. Lovely to see you all. I'm literally going to fly through this because I know we want to get on to see what Rachel's talking about. So just make sure that you are following us on our public Facebook page, our Textile Teacher Centre, the Textile Skills Centre, and the A-Level. So that's all our Facebook groups. Then we have got Instagram, which I do. So I expect you all to get on your phones while you're listening to me and click onto Instagram. Look at Rachel's face. Click onto Instagram and follow us on Instagram. That's amazing. And one good reason to follow us on Instagram is that any minute now we're going to have another big giveaway, and it's going to be an overlocker and 2 second prizes of £100 goodies from Janome. Okay, so well worth going on to Instagram. We have Pinterest, which has so many different pages in there for you to look at. I mean, go and have a look. And your students probably want to follow that. And then we're on YouTube with lots of career videos, and goodness knows how many. Rachel's will be on YouTube by tomorrow, possibly, Dawn. We have a mentorship program. If you want to be mentored for any reason whatsoever, go onto the website. It's on there. We have 2 things for sale: a pattern pack, which I know a lot of you have already got, really, really popular, the pattern pack, and the schemes of work. If you want to talk to me about them, please email nikki@textileskillscentre.com and I'll talk to you about it more. We've got the wonderful Rachel doing tonight, but we've got lots more tea and chats coming. The next one after that, I think, is the careers one. Then we've got one on 3D printing. We've got Linda Harvey. It's covered up there. We've got Linda Harvey, I know. And then we have got me doing one later on in the summer. Obviously, you'll want to come to that one too. And all of these will have their own resources, which we have on the teacher resources. So all the resources from all the tea and chats are all there. So go back and have a look at that. That's really lots and lots of teachers go and get the free resources. Student competition. So 2025, fabulous prizes, sewing machines, trophies, free courses, dryad vouchers, you name it, a million different prizes. The one thing I do say about this is if you want to do a whole, class, you can take photos of the whole class and send it as one thing with just their names on. So you can do it individually. It is all on the website. But if you want to do a whole class, I know that's sometimes easy for a teacher, just as they're working, go click, 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 click around the class. You can send the whole thing in one Zoomy go. And if we want more details, we'll come back to you. It makes life a lot easier.
But we do need their names on for each piece.
Yeah, with their names on it would be great. Right, courses. So we've got Rachel's online live planning assessment progression on the 28th of June. That's the D&T one, all about D&T, everything you want to know, everything. Then you've got me doing the art and design one. That's the week after the 5th of July. Everything you want to know about art and design, we run you through the whole thing. They're both online live, those ones. Then we've got lots of face-to-face workshops happening throughout the year. Don't forget, you've got 20% discount for ECTs, and there's a discount for self-funders too. So let me just go through them quickly. Fabric manipulation in Banbury, July and November. Essential manufacturing course, April and November. Heat press course, Barnsley in June. The creative pattern and garment making is in Guildford at the beginning of April. We've got Surface Textiles in Lutterworth at the end of March, and we've got Creative Felt Making in Guildford on the 7th of June. We have got, in a couple of weeks' time, the new course, which is Creative Textile Skills, which is a combination of sort of surface and fabric manipulation at Leighton Buzzards. That's Neil Milton Keynes on the 15th of March. I've missed one out, haven't I? I mean, we're at Bristol on Saturday. And if you still want to come.
We've also got another Surface Textiles course we just set up for the 21st of June in New Milton in Hampshire. So
near Birmingham. Bournemouth, sorry. Bournemouth. So yeah, I mean, there's still places to Bristol. If you want to go to Bristol, it's fine. So there's lots of online courses, online on-demand courses. There's lots of new ones on there. So don't think you've seen them all if you've gone in there before, because there are lots and lots of new ones. That's a really popular one, Creating Repeat Patterns for Print. And that's my new one, Mark Making for Textiles. Said I was quick as I could be, Rachel. Do come back to me or put anything in the notes if you want to ask about any of them. I'll answer them in the notes.
And don't forget to follow our Instagram.
Yeah, don't forget Instagram. I should be reminding you all the way through.
Every time I go anywhere with Nikki, that's her #1 thing is the Instagram account. So anyway, if you're not already following it, it will make Nikki very happy. She gets so happy about it. Maybe because I'm a millennial. Right, anyway, lovely to meet you. For those of you that haven't met before, my name's Rachel Addy. I have been teaching for a couple of years, several years, and before that have come from industry, so I'd still say quite new into the classroom, but I just thought that today I would share with you a couple of my tips when it comes to managing behaviour in a textiles classroom. I get often asked a lot of questions about teaching. Well, in general, people often are like, oh, how do you do that? But generally, people are always really curious how we manage behaviour in textiles. And I think most of us, we develop confidence in delivering it through experience, but there might be a few things that I can help you with some things that have definitely worked for me over the past couple of years. So hopefully everybody can see my screen. I'm just going to presume that we can. I'm going to run through a plethora of different things today. Again, feel free to drop questions in the chat box as we're going along, and you guys can also email me later on if you'd like me to share any resources. Dawn, after this session, is going to send out a link to the Dropbox, which will have some free resources for you to download and take back to your classrooms, as well as some homework for you. Just when you thought you was having a nice cup of tea and chat this evening, you've got some written work to take away. So first things first, can you use the chat box for me, please? I would like to hear from you what you think are the main challenges seen in a textiles classroom. There's obviously a reason why you're all here, and I'd like to know, before I go off on a tangent, what is it that you consider to be a problem, a challenge? Doesn't have to be huge, could just be that you're losing too many pins. What are the challenges that you find in your classroom? And then that'll just help me steer this tea and chat into the way that you guys would want it to be. So don't be shy, keep them coming, and then I'll try to go through them as I'm going along. Fighting, oh God, I've not put that on my agenda.
I've just seen that one. No. Oh God.
Right, we might need an extra hour, Dawn. Okay, perfect. Brilliant. Now, most of these I'm going to cover, so this is good news. Yeah, perfect. Okay, right. I think I've covered pretty much everything except the fighting. Woo! On to a winner. Okay, so again, throughout the course of the tea and chat, do stop me if you want to pop another question in there. I'm not going to read the chat box as I'm going along, but I will refer back to it at the end, and Nikki will shout out to me if there's anything she thinks I need to know mid presentation. So I've kind of broken it down into 4 key areas, and I will go into a lot more depth throughout these areas, but I'm looking specifically at students that are off task. Maybe there's some distraction, maybe they're not engaged for whatever reason. I'm going to look at misuse of equipment. I'm going to talk about time management, so they're taking too long, we can't get things done within an hour, and then safety concerns, but linking that as well to equipment. Okay, so they're the key things that I'm going to cover. I will go into other things as we go through the course. So my first biggest tip to you is when it comes to managing your time, you need to work on sound triggers. Now, if they're going to work, I'm just going to play them because you're going to love them. These are just 2 generic timers that I use on YouTube. And that sound to my kids means you've got 2 minutes, get yourself on a sewing machine, thread it up, unpack your equipment. If you're not done in 2 minutes, you are not done. You don't get on a sewing machine. So in the first few lessons, especially with year 7, I train them to this sound. So I don't even need to get them in, say, get your things out. I just hit play. Now, if you're using PowerPoints, what I do is embed that into my PowerPoint. We have to do recall questions in my school. It's kind of standard practice. Once they've done the recall, we hit start on that. Off they go. And it just became an embedded routine. And for me, I found the struggle was that students were taking far too long to get the machines ready. I'm not a teacher that has them threaded up. I like them to thread the machines every lesson. That's because I'm a DT teacher and I really want them to get into those habits of learning how to fix the machines. So I do not thread machines for students, and they know that. So it was a routine I developed right at the beginning that just meant that I didn't need to kind of shout and yell and get everybody going. And then the same thing for the end of the lesson. So again, it's all about the sound, the trigger. They hear this coming. There we go. You now have 5 minutes to get packed up, put your sewing machine away, work goes in your plastic wallets, everything in the box, standing behind your chairs before this timer is finished. Now, we can't help but have a little dance and a boogie as these are going on, so we do have a little bit of fun whilst they're happening, but this is how I kind of make sure that I'm in and I'm started as quick as possible. And by embedding those routines, the children know what is expected of them. So they know straight away that I expect a sewing machine to be threaded up in 2 minutes. I expect them to pack away in 5. It's clear, it's helpful for them because, yeah, they know what's coming every single lesson. And then also, just to follow on from that, is the clear flow of how the lessons work. So my school is very prescriptive. We have like a toolkit. Not all schools have those, but we have to do a recall. We have to do a think, pair, share. I know, roll your eyes, but it's okay. They know they're clear on what's going to be expected of them every lesson. And having said that, they're also clear in my setting that one lesson will be a practical and one lesson is a theory. So I don't get kids going, what are we doing today? What's happening? What are we doing a practical today? They just know. Tuesday's practicals, Thursday's a theory. So I find just really making sure that those routines are established in your classroom is just going to help with making sure that when they get in there, there's no shock, there's no surprise for them. They can just get cracking. Sorry, I knew it was going to do that, just in case you hadn't heard it once already. So just to recap on that very quickly, I think that the other thing is to just make sure that along with establishing your routines, that your expectations are clear to them as well. So they know about my entry routines, they know about my practical cleanup, they also know what to expect. So they know what happens in a practical lesson, what happens in a theory. So in a theory, I expect them to have a purple pen. They know that they need to be ready with their books out, and they know that in a practical, they still need to write down the date and title and the recall questions, but then they can put their books stacked neatly, and they can get on with the work. They know what my tolerated behaviour is. I like to think of myself as a bit of a wacky teacher, so I am that person. I will be dancing whilst those timers on. I will be gearing them up a little bit, but I will not tolerate any poor behaviour. I will not tolerate fighting over my sewing machines. I will not tolerate any misuse. And I'm really very clear on what my personal tolerance is, but also I link that very clearly to our school behaviour policy, so there's no shock there as well. And the other thing that I really like to do in lessons as well is, and this tends to help with behaviour, believe it or not, is give them a real life link. Right, today we're going to be doing hand sewing. I'm going to be teaching you about hand embroidery. I'm also going to be teaching you how to stitch on a button, because quite frankly, how many of you are going to bin your shirts if a button falls off? Most of you. I want to teach you something that's going to be useful for you in everyday life. I want to teach you how to stitch a button on. That was a really rubbish example. There are plenty more there, really. But just showing them how the lesson is relevant to life will even engage those students that have no interest in textiles at all. So expectations need to be there, they need to be set out, and children need to know what your expectations are. And again, I'm probably preaching to most of you. I do apologise. I know a lot of you will know these already. Nothing I'm teaching here is brand new. It's just reminders. So I'm going to give you 3 scenarios. And again, I want you to use the chat box for me here. I want to know, what would you do? Okay, so in these situations, what would you do? Okay, so scenario number 1, a student is refusing to wear an apron in your lesson. So I'm going to keep my chat box open. And again, I'd like to know, what would you do? I'll make a note of that ASD and timer question, come back to it. Yep, find out why. Brilliant, Alice. Yep. What's the reason? Yep, so again, understanding their SEND needs. Maybe it's something sensory. Maybe that's why they're not wearing it. Don't be shy. Come on, I've got 39 of you. Yeah, well done. So explaining why we need to wear it, clothes getting damaged. Brilliant. Yeah, so kind of, here's one option or here's another. Yeah, stains on happy parents. Yeah, absolutely non-negotiable. Yeah, so there's a number of different ways that you can go about refusal to wear an apron. I mean, I've got 3 that I tend to use. Funny enough, I sometimes give up my own apron, and I know a lot of teachers don't like to do that, but it works brilliantly in my food room, because when I'm teaching food, I've got the student aprons, and I have 2 teachers, ones behind me, and I've got a child with quite severe autism, but he will only wear my apron, and I'm okay with that. So if that's what it takes for him to put an apron on, he can wear my apron. And that was me understanding that he doesn't like touching other students' aprons that other students have touched, but he's more than happy to wear mine because he knows that I'm probably going to keep mine clean. Talking about the health and safety rules, that they must wear one for a safety reason. It could be that you're working with batik and they've got hot wax going places, and you don't want that getting onto their clothes or hurting them. It could be as well protecting their clothing. I often joke with them about their mums or their parents and carers, and say, I don't want your parents ringing me because you've got red tie-dye all over that beautiful white shirt, because it is not coming out. And sometimes just that justification will work. Or it could simply be that you're just setting that really firm boundary of, you need to wear an apron in this lesson, so I'm going to give you 2 choices. You can either put the apron on or you don't. And if you don't, you're going to have to sit to the side of the room and not participate in today's lesson. So you can really take a number of different approaches to this, but it's always going to be how your students react and knowing your students. There's nothing more valuable than knowing your students. Right, scenario number 2. What would you do? A group is misusing equipment. So that could be they're running around with a pair of scissors, or they're using a pair of scissors to cut paper. They are, they're sewing on the sewing machine with nothing underneath it. So they're misusing equipment. What would you do? I like that. Agreeing to the rules at the start of the year, signing contracts. That's good. Yeah, stop the whole group. Absolutely. Yeah, definitely ban them if they need to. Yeah, and again, yeah, health and safety concerns. Yeah, I like that. Remind, reset, remove. Yeah, nice. The repetitive ones are always good, aren't they? Book, buddy, boss. That's always my favourite. Yeah, so same types of things really, isn't it? I think for me, what works really well in my classroom is I talk about money. Now, you'd be surprised how much kids really do value money. And I think because they are aware of the cost of things, they don't always have their own money, of course not, but they can understand that by things having a cost to it can also result in us missing out in schools. So the one I tend to use a lot is, I'm really particular with my sewing machines. Nikki will tell you, she's been to my school. I do not let you slam your presser foot. I do not let you drop your foot pedal on the floor. I'm really particular about my sewing machines. And I explained to them, if you drop the foot pedal on the floor and it breaks, then ultimately I need to replace the spring inside, which costs me £35. Now, it's not the £35 that bothers me, it's the fact I've got 15 machines at £35. And also, every time I send one to be repaired, it takes a month to repair it. So there's only 15 machines, I've got 22 of you, you're now missing out because I've lost a sewing machine. So it's just explaining to them the damage, the cost of it as well, and then the fact that they're not going to have access to that anymore, because if it's sent off to be repaired, we're not going to be able to use that. And you know, sometimes having equipment monitors can help as well, because they tend to call them out as well. There are plenty of other ways that we can come across to fix the misuse of equipment, but I'll just leave it there for the moment. Right, one more. So I've got one more. A student is rushing through their sewing and is not using the machine safely, and they're ignoring the guidance. So these answers are probably going to be quite similar, but again, just having a little think, what would you do in that situation? Everyone's gone quiet now. Either that, they're all like frantically typing essays. Yep, you could remove them from the machine for the rest of the lesson. Stop them, yep. Yeah, again, health and safety. Yeah, switching the machine off. Yeah. So again, they're all quite similar, aren't they? They're just to kind of, you know, stop the class, stop the student, and then just remind them of the misuse of that machine. Again, explaining to them in the outset why they shouldn't be doing that. So when I use a sewing machine, and this is just a silly little trick, I actually hand out speeding fines. And yes, so Hilly, you've just said that. I have speeding fines on my sewing machines. And if they get a speeding fine, it's a break time detention. So when I'm demonstrating on the sewing machine, I show them the difference in speed, in sound. And I often refer this to my car, and I joke with the kids. I'm like, yeah, I drive a Ferrari. And what's really annoying about my Ferrari is how fast can it go? It can go 240 miles an hour. But what's the national speed limit? 70. I cannot believe my car can go so fast, but I can't even drive it as fast as I want to. And the reason is, why? Why can I not drive at 240 miles an hour? Because I'd crash, because it's not safe. And that's the same with the sewing machine. It would break, it's not safe. We need to slow it down. And I can hear when a sewing machine's going too fast, as all of you can as well. So I show them what that sounds like. Now, if I can hear somebody starting to go too quickly, I will just remind them there's a speeding ticket on its way to somebody. You need to slow it down. And if they do get a speeding ticket, it can be an minor invisible. I don't actually hand them out. I'll just say, Freddie, you've got a speeding fine. And that means they know that means that they need to stay in at break time. So just again, you know, having these different kind of tricks up your sleeve that will, I kind of use humor an awful lot in my lessons, just to kind of turn it down slightly. But having said that, if they were to then continue to misuse the machine after I've told them that, they wouldn't be on the machines anymore. Also, if a student is placed in detention for breaking or for misusing a machine, I think it's a really important opportunity to have a restorative with that student. So again, a student once broke a presser foot on my sewing machine, whether it was deliberate or not, I'm naive, I'm going to pretend it wasn't. Rather than just sitting them in a standard detention, I actually brought them back and showed them how to thread up the sewing machine properly and use it correctly and repair the machine with me. Now, I know that can take time, and it's not always something that we're able to do, but it really does then, it points them out in front of the rest of the class. Those two students then was like, oh yeah, we was here last night, we had to repair the machine. So it showed the rest of the class then that I held them accountable. So you're not going to misuse my machines and get away with it. Now, obviously, if it was acting dangerously, we would probably respond to that ever so slightly differently. So if they are absolutely, you know, if somebody's got a finger underneath it, or, you know, something really dangerous is about to happen, then I would stop the entire lesson. So I have had a student almost stitched my finger before, and it was terrifying. I've never done it again since. You're all going to roll your eyes and tut at me, but I started to thread his needle whilst he was sat at the machine. Whoops. So I leant over his shoulder and threaded his needle whilst it was switched on, and he put his foot down on the foot pedal. So, you know, when that happened, it actually was a mistake. He didn't mean to do it, but I stopped the lesson. Everybody went back to their seats. I was also told in my training years, and it's stuck with me all these years, is, you know, if 2 or 3 of them are getting it wrong, the whole group don't understand. Okay, so if 3 of them are threading up a machine wrong, or if 3 of them are misusing scissors, they all don't get it. So if at that third point, when you've seen somebody doing something incorrectly, stop the entire class and bring them back together, which again, a lot of you have said in your responses. So thank you very much. So yeah, some really, really good answers in there. Pairing them with sensible students as well is always a really good one. So just then want us to take us back to why we sometimes see poor behaviour in our classrooms. And one of the main reasons we see poor behaviour is because the students are bored, they're disinterested, they're just not generally engaged in the lesson at all. And I think we can break that down to three key reasons why that might be. It's either that behavioral engagement, that emotional engagement, or that cognitive engagement. So either behavioral being, oh, they just can't be bothered, the time and effort that they've got to put in, they just don't want to participate. They're just, it's too much for them, so then they misbehave. That emotional engagement is, they're staring into the space, they've got their heads on their desk, they're just really not bothered. And then that cognitive engagement is thinking that if they haven't got that cognitive engagement, then they're not digging deep, they're not learning or wanting to learn or to fix problems on their own, they're not thinking for themselves. I promote the word autonomy in my classroom a lot, and that's because actually, don't judge my teaching here, but I'll often say to the students, if I can sit and drink my cup of tea, then I'm a really good teacher. If I can sit at my desk and drink my tea and nobody needs me, then I've done an excellent job. And that's because they should be able to get on without me. They should be engaged enough to go off and to know what it is I need them to do. So that cognitive engagement, that deep learning, is where I kind of want my students to be. But we need to acknowledge what is the reason for their lack of engagement. So I'm hoping you've all seen this video, but I am going to play it anyway, because I think one of the key things to get students on board right at the beginning is to remove that stereotype. So again, I use quite a few stories in my first kind of settings, and this tea and chat would have been brilliant in September rather than now necessarily, but hopefully you'll still take something away from it. I think in my either first or second lesson, I tend to play this video to students, and it is just to remind them of why textiles is so important. But it removes the idea that it's just for girls, or it's just that sewing thing. So when I joined my school, and this is a true story, I went to the PE department and I went to go and offer my help with the D of E stuff in the beginning, and the PE teacher said to me, oh, what is it that you're teaching? I said, oh, I teach textiles. And he was like, oh, is that sewing thing? And I was like, well, what do you teach? That running around a field thing? Like, come on. And I had this whole conversation with him then about how, you wouldn't be winning football matches if it wasn't for our performance textiles. And we definitely wouldn't be winning wars and protecting soldiers if it wasn't for our Kevlar. And need I remind you that arteries are replaced with knitted tubes? And we won't even talk about the carbon fibre that is used in your car that you like to drive around, which is also a textile product. It's just removing that idea that textiles is a girly subject, or textiles is a very feminine practice. So I am just going to play this really quickly. I'm sorry to those that have seen it, but those that haven't seen it will thank me forever.
You sheltered me from home, kept me warm, kept me warm. You gave my life to me, set me free, set me free.
Oh, sorry.
You sheltered me from finest years I ever knew.
It is my favourite video of all times. And, you know, when I've sat on a parents' evening before and someone has said to me, "What is textiles?" And I look at them and I'm like, everything. Like everything is textiles. The chair that you sat on, the sofa that you're lounging in, the carpet that you're walking on, the curtains that you close, like what you're wearing. I go as dramatic to children and I'll say to them, you can say to your parents that without clothes you will die. That is a fact. Without clothes, you will die. So we can be as dramatic as saying that textiles is life-saving in multiple different ways. And if you want that new dress, you just tell your mum that you might die. I then do go on and tell them about the difference between a need and a want. But I think removing that stereotype of textiles being a girly subject is so important in the beginning days, just to engage the boys, especially because a lot of the behaviour problems can come from when they don't think they need it or they don't think they need to be there. I've got a whole free resource that will come out on this. So it is a lesson that I teach. I get the kids to write down everything weird that they can see in that video. Why is it weird? Why is he cleaning himself with a cactus? Why are they sitting on tin seats? Why is he hugging the animal at the end? What's the difference about the animal fibre compared to what he's got already? So when then I start to, you know, from this, I then lead into a fibres and fabrics lesson. Again, sorry, art textile teachers, I'm a DT teacher and I love it. Apologies. So just removing that stereotype and promoting engagement is absolutely going to help. We are lucky that we're a practical subject anyway, and that definitely means that we get a better engagement than some other subjects. We're able to also alter our projects based on their interest. That helps with engagement too. Don't judge me on this. I need to change it all, okay? But I do a cushion in year 7 and I do a bag in year 8. I am working on changing that. I've just got a new job, guys. So please, again, don't judge me. But you know, they choose what they're going to put on it. And of course, the boys all want to put football players on things, and you know, the girls have flowers on everything. But they can change those projects to incorporate what it is that interests them. Let them pick, you know, let them choose their own fabrics, let them pick from different projects, slightly different, you know. Maybe girls want to make a little kind of handbag or a clutch bag, and the boys can make a tote bag to put their football kit in. You know, having different projects, similar projects, but, you know, differentiating and letting students pick gives them that ownership. Making it for somebody else is another really good way. So I find grandparents really useful here, and I often go down that route of, you know, I'm hopeful that everybody still has a grandparent in their lives, and grandparents love a present. So right, when's your mom's birthday, when's your sister's birthday, make it for them. I feel like when they are making it for someone, they don't care that they're making an apron that they're never going to wear, because that apron could be for grandma and that's going to get them some bonus points. So I always tell them, if they get chocolates or pocket money, I need 10%. Gamification works really well for me. Again, I will come back to that ASD question at the end, but speed challenges for threading up my needles. Yeah, working against the clock I use quite often. Packing away in colour order, I use that quite often. So when they're putting my threads away, I make sure they do it all in colour codes. Some kids love it, some don't, but it does mean that then I've got that one kid that makes sure all my threads are in order, and they like them all neatly tidied up. Responsibilities in terms of classroom champions, I'm sure you've got these already, but have one student that is responsible for all unpickers, one student that is responsible for switching off the irons. And at the beginning of the lesson, you can write them on the boards, or have them on the PowerPoints. It can be that you change them every week, or you can have it for an entire rotation, or an entire, if you're doing art textiles throughout the year, you can have it just that is their job until you decide to change it. So every lesson, Jeremy is responsible for picking up all the pins on the floor with the magnets. When you're demoing, again, just like we said with health and safety, if you see that engagement is dropping because they're not enjoying what they're doing, stop. Right, everyone back to me, please. Let's try again. Let's look at a different technique, or let's move on from it. And then, yeah, asking them to, you know, ask questions as they're going along, get them to do participation during demonstrations. Again, I like a lot of jokes in my lessons. So when I do a tie-dye lesson, I always get the boys to do an elastic band because they're rubbish at it. And then I'll sit there and say, sorry, I'm really sexist, but actually it's because girls tie their hair up every day, so they're far better at tying elastic bands, and boys, you're just rubbish. And then I get the boys to go against the girls and be like, right, who can actually do this better? So it's that engagement, that competition. I play them off against each other, but at the same time I'm reminding them that elastic bands are actually really expensive. with. So if I see them pinging across a classroom, they don't do tie-dye anymore, or they'll buy me a new box of them. So I very rarely have problems with elastic bands, because I know teachers have asked me about that before, like how do I stop them flicking them around the room? Honestly, I don't see it. And I think it's just that expectation that if it does happen, the whole class will lose that opportunity to do tie-dye. Health and safety then was like the next kind of point on their agenda, but also another point that people were bringing up in the chat box. And it is a really hard one, isn't it? Because we have to have high expectations because of all our risk assessments, because of CLEAPs, because of everything else that we need to follow. So I think just making sure, again, that you're setting out your expectations to your students at the beginning of the lesson is the most important thing. But honestly, trust them. I found that to be my absolute saving grace. The more trust you give them, the more they show you, I believe. And again, I always joke that I'm naive, but I do think that if you trust them, they will respect that trust in most cases. You will always have those 2 students that do mess around. You will always have those 2 students that are not doing what you're asking. But just remember the 98% of the group that are doing it, that do follow your instructions, that you can trust, and focus on those. So when my classroom's kind of set up, I often have my back to them, and I'll say to them, I need to trust you. And if I can't trust you, if I can't turn my back on you, if I can't leave you to get on with a bit of work, then we'll just go back to doing book work. This is your opportunity to learn a practical skill. And again, with the policy, I remind them, our school policy, we've got the first warning, final warning, you're in a matrix, you're out in the reflection room. We have that in my school. When I do a practical lesson, I'll explain to them, I have got a 0 warning policy. So if you are messing around dangerously, if you're threatening another student with a pair of fabric shears, you're out. That's it. Done. Game over. So it's just, that's my expectation. And the reason why is because I don't have time to be managing a class full of students trying to do their practical work and manage and watching you for your behaviour. So it's just goodbye, see you later. Showing them correct versus incorrect. I'm sure you've all done it yourselves, but I love showing them about scissors. And again, DT teacher in me talking about ergonomics and why anthropometric data is important to design those scissors. We look at the measurement of the hand, and the scissors will have a larger hole for all 4 fingers and a single hole for the top. You all know that, but we all know kids hold them upside down and then they don't cut properly, and then they whinge at me when they don't cut properly. So just, showing them how to use them correctly and reminding them the safest way to do that is just, again, lay out every single bit of equipment, what's safe and what's not. And then, explaining what happens when that mistrust is broken. So what will happen to them if they don't follow instructions. For me, I won't let them work autonomously. So I do the driving test. And again, I'm sure you all do this, but we have one of those little paper driving tests. If they fail 3 times, they cannot use a sewing machine unsupervised. And I tell you now, no kid fails that driving test. Not at all. If you don't say that to them, they will fail it because they think it's funny to fail it. But they won't if they think that they're never going to be able to operate a machine by themselves. So the loss of privilege is that they can't work independently. They have to wait for somebody else to do it with them, or they have to wait for me. And no kid likes waiting for me either. And also, I've tried behaviour contracts in the past as well. So if a child is really not behaving in your room, that could be because they've got some additional learning needs, then a really simple behaviour contract can help. And when I do behaviour contracts, I always get them to give me 2. So I'm going to say 2 ways that I think this classroom can be better if your behaviour changes. And I want you to give me 2 ways I can get better. Tell me 2 ways you want me to change as your teacher. What can I do to help you in this classroom to help you behave? Because then it puts the onus back on them. You're telling them that you can see they're misbehaving, and it's my fault you're misbehaving. So you tell me as your teacher what I can do to help you. So if you're ever going to do a behaviour contract, make them come up with 2 things that they're going to do and 2 things that you want them to do. And then from that, it's like a joint contract. It's not just something that you've given them. Managing equipment, visuals here. And it takes time to get this built up. I've got a bobbin case holder that fits beautifully inside a drawer. It has the right amount of holes cut out in it, so each individual bobbin can fit inside the holder. It takes 2 seconds for me to look in there and go, right, I've got 2 bobbins missing. everybody go look for a bobbin. We're not leaving the room until we get these back. Same with needles and pins. So with needles, I've got a piece of felt for each student. It's got 2 needles, it's got 6 pins. Every student gets one of those. Again, they're just really quick for you to have a look at. I can see that they're there, I collect them back in. Another thing that one of my co-teachers, another teacher in my school taught me, is print the seating plan out. If you've got class charts, this works amazing, and get them to stab their face. It works amazingly, they love it. So they print the seating plan and they stab their face, and that means that they've put their needle back. And then at the end of the lesson, you can see that every student has returned their needles. For pins, they drive me mad because they're so expensive and we lose so many of them. But students really love collecting them in with magnets. Your SEN students will love this. Give them a couple of magnets, send them around the room at the end of the lesson just to pick up all the pins. They will go mad for it. You can buy either the magnet pens off Amazon, or I got the woodwork specialist teacher to make me one. It looks like a walking stick, and the kids, they walk around, no, not a walking stick, a metal detector, and they walk around the room like that, like collecting all the pins off the floor and the worktops, and they go wild for it. But it's just a good way of collecting those pins in, and that can be a reward, believe it or not. That can actually be a reward. Right, you've done really well today, Jeremy, you can collect my pins in at the end of the lesson. They're like, woohoo. And actually they're just doing you a job. You might even have a checklist, like a laminated checklist. So at the end of the lesson, on each table, you know, you can tick off that all of the equipment is back. Again, that just depends on your time. If you haven't got a lot of time, if you're working on 1 hour lessons like the majority of us are, you might not be able to do that. So the visual ones really help me. So again, I've got scissor inserts that go in my trays. So fabric shears, I can fit 20 inside one tray. The way that they're stacked up, I can see that they're all there. The needles in my in my needle counter, I can see if there's one missing. So they're really quick wins. And having monitors for those as well, like student ambassadors. I've got 2 students in my year 8 group who absolutely love being my sewing machine monitors. So their job at the end of the lesson is to make sure that the bobbin holders are back in the machine, because I do not tolerate those being left out anywhere, because if we lose one, we're in trouble. So their job is to check at the end of lesson that they're all back in there. Now, in the first few sessions, I double checked their work, that they were in there, but now I don't need to do that. I know that they will tell me if there is a bobbin holder missing. And then lastly, I explained to them about my equipment, that in my classroom it is a tool, but what happens when it leaves my classroom, it becomes a weapon. So if you've got a pin in your hand outside of my room, that is a weapon, and we will treat it as such in the school. Now, I did have a stitch unpicker go missing last week, the week before half term, and we could not understand. And I had a sewing machine needle go missing, believe it or not, and this is very recently. And I asked our leadership team to get involved, and I do have a very, very supportive school. My leadership will help follow up on things like this, so I am fortunate. But I wasn't in the room at the time that the needle went missing, but the child had taken it outside of the room, and it was noted as a weapon. That went down on their class charts as a weapon, and I make that really clear to all the kids in my classroom. You cannot take anything out of this classroom, because if you do, it will be logged as misuse. It will be logged as a weapon. So please, please, please be careful. If you take something by accident, which my stitch unpicker kid did, he actually, it was really cute. He was running down the corridor with this stitch unpicker, and this other teacher confiscated it, and he came running straight to me to be like, I was on my way back with it, but I've had it confiscated. What do I do? And he was so upset with himself. It was year 7, because I told him it was a weapon, but he was devastated that he might get caught with it, bless him. But he did come and find me, and I went to tell that teacher that, you know, he'd accidentally put it in his pencil case. And that was my mistake, because in my new school, I don't have a pot for my stitch unpickers. They're just all over the place. So I'm trying to put these back in place for myself in my new school as well. So your homework is, and I've got these on the link that is going out, and obviously you don't have to do these, but I would love for you to have a think about a classroom management checklist in order to help you. So that might include, like, what would an entry routine look like in your classroom? How might you track equipment? Could you have it just as a little tick box list that's up on the wall, and, you know, a student comes and ticks it as at the end of the lesson? Maybe you want to think about the engagement strategies, you know, what types of things can you do in your classroom to make sure that students are participating and then also thinking about your cleanup expectations. It could also be like it could be anything really. These printable lists could be either for you to track at the end of every lesson and look at your room, or it could be that a student has them in their books or in the front of their sketchbooks, and they have to tick them off, or they just know what they look like. I know in the maths department they use planners, and they've got the green and the red side of things, like, and they use those as like entry and exit routine tickets. So the green side can be everything's checked and accounted for, or the red is something missing. So, it can be really something as simple as that. So I'd love you to have a little think about how could you make a classroom management checklist. The other thing is, I would love for you to try one of these classroom management strategies this week or next week, and I'd love you to tell me about it. I'd like to get some feedback so that when I deliver this session again next time, I can improve it based on your feedback. But what method have you tried from today's session, and how has that helped you? And then lastly, and again, I've got some printouts for you, you could have a think about a responsibility chart. So could you assign an equipment manager or a needle checker? Could you come up with a student ambassador badge or something just to really help promote that engagement, and kind of alleviate that responsibility from you? Give that role to somebody else so that you're not feeling so bogged down with it all. So lastly, whilst I take a little breath, what is one strategy that you're going to take back to the classroom with you? You can share it with me in the chat box, or you can just make a little note for yourself. That is everything that I've got to deliver in terms of the PowerPoint presentation. I will answer any questions that anybody has. I hoped that you've got something from there that was different, something new that you might not know, a little tip, even if it was just my speeding fines. I'm not really sure, but do feel free to drop any other questions in the chat box and I will be sure to answer them for you. There is quite a lot for me to look through. Nikki, Dawn, do you want to step in a minute whilst I read some questions?
Yeah, there was one area that you might have done it. I was in the chat, and this is I think a little bit more for art and design teachers, but it's teacher and student juggling different techniques while walking around the room. So they might leave one set of students where they're off doing another set of students. So managing the teacher, managing the students as when they're around the room. I mean,
I have mine on rotation. So in terms of doing the same thing at the same time, it is a bit more difficult. But mine tend to be, I have one group on the iron, I've got one group on a sewing machine, I've got one group over on the tables that are painting. So I kind of have my classrooms in zones and they tend to move around them. I can see from GCSE, like art textiles point of view, that can be a little bit more chaotic. Is it in terms of them sharing equipment, or is the question more about?
no, I think it was about movement around the room. I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, when I was observed by teachers and by Ofsted, and I had I tend to not have more than 3 things going on at the same time. Some might find 3 techniques a lot, but they were well impressed by. I don't think they ever heard the little chatter, because there was little chatter. But they were so impressed by the engagement of having so many things going at the same time that I was never afraid to have more than one thing happening at the same time. They were more than impressed. I think they were a little mind boggled by it all, to be honest with you, and didn't really understand it. I would never be afraid to have more things going on than you need. And I would be the one that was probably by the machines. So the machines being the most dangerous. If they got dye everywhere, whatever. Such is life. But the machines, so you just have to choose. I think that if you've got 3, like as you said, Rachel, if you're doing batik, that is something unique. I probably wouldn't have batik and machines on at the same time. So pick your techniques, I would say. So anything like marbling or anything that involves dyes is not that dangerous.
Yeah, and zoning it as well. I think like I have the back of the room is dyeing, the side of the room is sewing, and then this kind of forward bit is where the handwork kind of goes
So
on.
did
So
I, yeah.
thinking about your layout of your room can really help if you've got an opportunity to kind of change that up a little bit. My heat press and my iron is away at one side as well. So then when they are moving between, they're kind of yeah, they're in their little zones. Mine tend to move in a bit of a circle. I don't know how that happened, but they do. They tie-dye, they hang it up, they iron, they go to the sewing machine, they're back to their tables. It does kind of, it works. So it's just over time you kind of figure out how that works in your classroom.
I wouldn't be frightened of it.
No.
That's all I'd say.
It's trust, isn't it? It's absolutely trust, and it's just something that it has to be from the first lesson that you set that up with them, and starting with year 7 right the way through. If you've gone into a school like now, I've gone into a school and my year 10, well, I don't teach GCSE at the minute, it's coming back, don't worry, I brought it back quick, but my year 9s, you know, they haven't had me for 2 years, they don't know my expectations. It's really difficult to get those going again. Whereas my year 7s, because they're new to the school, they've never had textiles before, it's so easy. You walk into my textiles in year 7 and it's, you know, the room's buzzing, the timers go on, they know it, it's just routine, it's just keep drilling those expectations. Has anybody got any other questions? There was an awful lot that I went through. I could have gone through a hell of a lot more. So
I
yes.
did write a lot of them down, Rachel, and I ticked off all the ones that you did, which was all of them mostly.
Yeah, so there was an ASD timer one, wasn't there? So that one can be quite difficult. I've got, I do have a student in my room who's sensitive to sound, and she wears headphones, like they're noise cancellers. There's no music in them, and I just let her know that once I'd showed her the sound, she was okay with it. She wasn't shocked by them anymore. And I do also have ASDs. It's quite a few students with ASD in the classroom. They actually love it. So I've never really come across a problem with the timers, or not that's been presented to me. But I will certainly look out for it. I think if the timers are too much, then no music, just a timer with no music on the board might be helpful. Yeah, or pairing them up with somebody and seeing if they can race each other rather than racing a timer. Often when I do the threading up the sewing machine in 2 minutes, whoever's the fastest then goes on to tackle me, because I can thread up a sewing machine in like 6 seconds. So they love that, because I'm like, right, ready, go, beat me. And they can't, they can never beat me. But I do sometimes let them win. So it could just be race the teacher rather than race the timer. See if you can thread it up quicker than me. Right, sorry, we've got a couple more. How do you organise equipment and materials so that GCSE? I let them in my cupboard. That's going to really upset some of you, and I'm really sorry, but I let kids go in the cupboard. I let them take what they want. I let them help themselves. I let them put things back. I trust my students in my cupboards. And I know that that's really bad for a lot of people and they cannot bear that. But I honestly operate with trust. I do have textile students that come in on a Tuesday and tidy everything up for me. So if there is a mess in there, they will come and sort it. But very, very rarely do students take anything they shouldn't or mess anything up that they shouldn't. So I do have GCSE boxes, and I used to in my old school have a whole cupboard for A level and a whole cupboard for just GCSE students that had. So, for example, Angelina fibres would only be in my GCSE cupboards. My marbling inks would only be in my GCSE cupboards, and those GCSE students could go and get them. The other thing I find really good with managing GCSE work is I give everybody, I don't think, like, this is a really rubbish example, but give everybody like a folder. You know, like mine are plastic zip up ones, and everybody puts their own equipment in there. In A level, I used to sell them equipment, make it up yourself, but you order in equipment pouches and give them a pencil case with 1 set of shears, 5 needles, bag of pins, put that in them for A level, and that is their pencil case with their equipment that they use every lesson. So I find that really, really helpful as well. So that's how I organise equipment for GCSE students. Numbers, I refuse to teach over 22. I don't know if refusing is the right word. There are a lot of conversations going on about class sizes.
Yeah.
I would.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say that's mine. How do you go about kind of saying that? Because as a new teacher, and I'm saying, oh, I don't think you should teach more than 24, and they're just saying, oh well, it's the trust policy.
No, it's not policy. You can bring up, so Data have got a whole document on it, the health and safety principles behind it. There's also CLEAPS documents that state.
I've seen the CLEAPS on before, yeah.
So just put that in front of them. You can go to your site manager and your business manager and say, right, risk assessment, please. If I've got more than 22 in here, I need a teaching assistant full time because I can only have so many with so many machines. It's just pushing back and it takes time. If you haven't got that in your school already, it will be a massive fight and I feel for you, but be strong.
Okay, thank you.
Be strong. I wouldn't take more than 22 if you can help it. How do you, oh, sorry. The sound, no, music is great. The sound stresses are out. Is that my timer sound? Or I'll come back to that one because I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, that was me. Yeah, it was the timer. That's fine. Thank you.
Just do a plain timer. You don't have to put music on.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. Yeah.
Yeah, you can even do, it depends on, some students prefer counting up as well and counting down. You'll find that's quite different. I do, when they go to the toilet, I put my watch on. I'm like, right, you've got 2 minutes, go. And I just put it on my watch. So they don't watch the timer, they just know I've got it on.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Large groups with not enough machines drives me mental. So I've got that problem at the minute, Jenny, in my new school. In my old school, it was beautiful. I had one machine for every student.
Try to answer that one by saying do techniques that don't use machines. There are mountainous amount of surface techniques that you can do that don't use machines.
And hand sewing, so flip it between. So again, DT teacher, sorry, if I'm doing seams and hems in a lesson, one group writes up the technique whilst the other goes and does it, then they swap. I've also got, I'll incorporate a design lesson, so someone needs to sketch the technique or put a design idea together whilst the other one goes off and does it. So it's just having a group in 2 halves, or they work in pairs. So you will have, I don't like 2 on a sewing machine, but you will have one person that's like the runner, will go and get things for them. They work together ultimately. They share a sewing machine. They take it in turns. So, right, I've finished with mine now, Arlo, you can go and do yours. Threading machines. I love my threading machine class. I wish you could all come and watch me teach it. Maybe I'll get someone to film it for me. I have my own language when I thread a sewing machine and the kids love it. So they remember, so your take up lever is actually a thingy what's it or a wiggly woo. It depends. So when you're threading up a sewing machine, you need to get your wiggly woo out. Has everyone got their wiggly woo? Right, see your wiggly woo? And I make stupid noises and I call them funny things and they remember it. So if you think about, I don't know if I've got one here. This one will make you laugh, I think. So with my bobbin holder, okay, so when I'm threading my bobbin, where's your eye? Find your eye on your bobbin. Right, there's your eye. Okay, above your eye, you've got a little V. To the left, you've got a little C, pinky up. Okay, so when you thread your bobbin, in it goes, little V, little C, pinky up, into the machine until it clicks. The kids all say it. They repeat it after me. They're like a little chain. I got someone to come and observe me the other day, one of our other textiles teachers, and I was like, you're never going to understand what we're saying, but the kids understand it. Right, girls, what do we do when we've got split ends? We cut it. Get your scissors out, cut your split ends, thread your needles. When you're threading your needles, don't do this because look, it's all floppy and horrible. Make sure it's nice and tight into your fingertips. Cut it, finger behind the needle, boop, bob's your uncle, off you go. That's how I teach threading a sewing machine. It's like a whole new language, but they love it. They find it really funny. So you will sometimes have kids sat there with their pinkies in the air though, but it works. Yeah, so pinky up until it clicks. I'm more than happy to do a little video of me teaching kids how to thread up a sewing machine if anyone wants one, but you probably will need English subtitles on there. What else have I got? We're not allowed more 20 in a room. How do you organise equipment and materials? I've done that one.
You've done most of them. You've done most of them, Rachel.
Oh, let me go.
Yeah, I've had a look. I've answered a few.
I have time as well, Rach. That was absolutely
Sorry, I could keep going.
That was absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much. If you've got any more questions, then it's rachel@textileskillscentre.com. You can actually contact her direct if you don't mind that, Rachel.
Not at all. I do. I've got a million ideas. So yeah, anything you need, just let me know.
Just a huge.
Rachel is one of